Can you introduce yourself for me?
My name is Farid Alatas. I'm a sociologist from the National University of Singapore. What we are seeing in the last few years is that more and more students at the master's and PhD level are going into Nursi studies. And I would say there's been an improvement in the quality. What I think is still developing is the ability to apply concepts and theories from the various fields in the humanities and social sciences to Nursi studies. And I think there are still problems with that application, but this is something to be expected in a new field of studies. And Nursi studies is a relatively new field of studies.
Okay, so how important is it for young people to learn about the work of Sayyid Nursi?
Sayyid Nursi, as a theologian, is unique in the sense that he is one of the most interesting and remarkable theologians to have come out of the modern period. There are many great theologians who lived in pre-modern times, but Nursi, having lived in the late 19th century and early 20th century, was reflecting on the problems that are peculiar to our age. So here we have an intellectual, a theological resource that who had familiarity with our modern problems. So therefore, if young people are interested in a religious, a theological, and Islamic approach to modern problems, Nursi would be one of the most important resources. Nursi studies is relatively new. If you look at other scholars from the Islamic tradition, Al-Ghazali, Ibn Rushd, Ibn Khaldun, you have centuries of scholarship. So Nursi studies is relatively new, and therefore it is extremely important that a lot of emphasis be given to academic studies on Nursi. If not, the danger is that you will have sort of trafficking of simplistic ideas about Nursi, or reducing Nursi to simplistic ideas. And this is common when you have a figure like Nursi who is appropriated by not only the masses but also by academics and intellectuals. I think what has been happening with Nursi studies is very interesting in the sense that you have a foundation, the Istanbul Foundation for Science and Culture, which in the last couple of decades has been actively promoting Nursi studies with the idea of creating a critical mass of scholars that will contribute to the understanding of Nursi, and more importantly, that will make Nursi's ideas relevant to modern problems. So I think in the last few years, the emphasis of the foundation has been on graduate students, because it is important for the next generation to think in a more sophisticated manner about the relevance of Nursi to the problems that are specific to our times: exploitation, the ills of capitalism, sense of alienation and anomie that are peculiar characteristics of the modern age. And these are issues that earlier theologians such as Al-Ghazali could not have thought of because they were not living in this time. But Nursi did think of these issues. So what we are lacking in Nursi studies is the elaboration of those issues using concepts and ideas from the Islamic tradition as well as from the modern humanities and social sciences.
So would you say these are the suggestions that you have for the foundation then?
Well, I think these are suggestions that I have made. They're suggestions that some of the other Nursi scholars have made. And the foundation is actually taking them into account. And one of the concrete manifestations of this is this graduate conference. When I compare the discourse of the students today, and also what I experienced last year, to several years back, I think there's a big difference in terms of the academic or intellectual standard. I remember several years ago, the standards were extremely poor. Students would often make simplistic statements about Nursi. They would reduce a complex idea in Nursi to a very simplistic notion. And that showed their level of understanding. Over the years, Nursi scholars had stressed the importance, and one of the things I stress as well, of doing comparative studies between Nursi and other great scholars from the Islamic tradition as well as from outside. For example, comparisons with great Christian theologians. So we've been seeing more and more students making these comparisons in their thesis. We're also seeing more and more non-Muslim students taking an interest in Nursi. So this has helped to this comparative perspective, and the fact that non-Muslims, non-Turks are studying Nursi has helped to raise the intellectual standards. And this is what I'm seeing in this conference.
So would you happen to have any direct advice to the students?
Well, I suppose what I've always been telling the students is that they should think in concrete terms, that it is not enough to remain at the level of abstractions. For example, there's been much discussion about the concept of tajdeed, renewal, from Nursi's point of view. Now, we should not remain at the abstract level. We should think of what tajdeed in Nursi means for the problems of modern capitalist society, because Nursi was living at a time when capitalism was developing. It was establishing itself in Western Europe and the Muslim world, the entire globe, in fact. So what Nursi meant by tajdeed is certainly not the same thing as what Ibn Khaldun would have meant by tajdeed, or Al-Ghazali would have meant by tajdeed. The basic principles of renewal would be similar or same across the ages, but the specific pathologies of society that Nursi identified are vastly different today, are vastly different in Nursi's time and today as compared to pre-modern or pre-capitalist times. So we should keep, students should keep moving back and forth between the abstract and the concrete.
Where do you see the work of Sayyid Nursi heading in the next, say, 5 years?
Well, I would prefer to think of it in the longer term. It's very crucial that more and more students are introduced to Nursi from diverse backgrounds: Muslims, non-Muslims, Turks, non-Turks. It's very important that more and more masters and PhD students are working on Nursi from a comparative perspective. What you need is not 5 years, but you need 1, 2, 3 decades of such scholarship for there to be an identifiable school of thought founded on the works of Nursi that influences scholarship not only in theology, but in sociology, in history, in literature. I think that, for example, literature is an area that has not been affected by Nursi studies. So for there to be a school of thought, a Nursi school of thought, it should influence various fields, various disciplines. And that takes decades to develop. In order to start that process of development, I think we have started it. There has to be more and more graduate studies that should be sustained over a long period of time.
Thank you very much, and it was a pleasure meeting you. Thank you.